Welcome in, Hokies fans, to this edition of the Tech Sideline Podcast. On today's episode, we'll discuss the new additions to the incoming football class via the transfer portal, and we'll talk about what the heck is going on with the Hokies basketball team. It's not time to panic yet, but things can get out of hand quickly. We'll tell you why and more right here. It's episode 280 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, and it starts right now. We record on Monday, January 18th, 2023 from the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center right here in Blacksburg, Virginia. We welcome you in whether you are listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you consume your podcasts, or if you're watching on YouTube. If you do happen to be on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe while you're there, and also turn on that notification bell so that you don't miss any future TSL content. This edition of the Tech Sideline Podcast is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. Who you choose to bank with can make all the difference in your overall experience. First Bank and Trust Company is the bank that puts you first. Visit www.firstbank.com to learn more. All right, guys, I think some introductions are in order here, so let's introduce the crew for today's show. Will Stewart, founder and general manager at Tech Sideline right across the way. To my right, lead analyst and columnist Chris Coleman. In the fourth chair today, Miss Katie Adams. Behind the scenes producing, of course, is Nick Brown, and I'm your host for today, Giovanni Heater. All right, it's been a minute since we've been here. Since January 4th was our last Tech Sideline podcast, so how's everybody doing?
Good, man.
So is this your first time hosting the podcast? I know you've been in that chair many times, but this is the first time. Second time.
We did one. I think Katie. Yeah. Katie was busy a couple weeks ago before break.
All right, so let me put in an additional plug for First Bank and Trust Company. They are giving away 10 Tech Sideline subscriptions over the course of a 10-week stretch. Gave away the first one last week. Congratulations to Eric Glass of Salem, Virginia. Eric was a non-subscriber, so he was very excited when he won his subscription.
All right.
If you're watching on YouTube, we drop a link down in the description where you can enter to win a free one-year Tech Sideline subscription, $100 value. And let's see, one winner will be, like I said, one winner a week for the next 10 weeks, including last week. So see the link, and we appreciate the sponsorship of First Bank and Trust Company, or they're the presenting sponsors of Tech Sideline, not just the podcast. If you are listening, see if you can remember this, www.firstbank.com/TSL-pass-giveaway. So
Interesting.
Enter early and often. Actually, I think you can only enter once. I actually have no idea. I guess we should get that straight with them.
Right.
So anyway, congratulations to the host chair, and
well, thank you.
You are not allowed to smile at any given time when discussing Syracuse versus Virginia Tech.
All right, fair enough. I'll hold it in, but really grateful for the opportunity. So thank you, guys. Well, a lot has happened since we last talked. Like I said, it was January 4th, the last time around. So there's a lot to cover today. It's a jam-packed day. Let's first begin with some football news. 3 big additions in the transfer portal. We'll run them down, and then we'll kind of go guy by guy and talk about them a little bit. First and foremost, Jaylin Lane, 5'8", 183-pound wide receiver, transfer from Middle Tennessee. He was only in the portal for 2 days before deciding to sign with Virginia Tech. 69 receptions, 940 yards, 5 touchdowns a season ago. 2 years of eligibility left. Chris, I'll go to you first. Your thoughts on what Jaylin Lane brings to the table?
Yeah, it's interesting. When he was at Middle Tennessee, he played outside receiver almost all the time, despite being 5'8". So you would think he's going to transition into a slot role at Virginia Tech, considering the Hokies also signed 2 outside receivers in the portal. We know he's athletic enough and talented enough to beat ACC defenses. 4 catches, 130 yards against Miami this past season, including 1 catch that went for like 80 yards or thereabouts.
Almost for a
touchdown. So, yeah, I mean, it appears to me the physical talent is there. So, got to put him in the right position to succeed.
So you see him playing in the slot for Virginia Tech?
I would think so.
Are you, you know the roster better than I do. Are you a little bit, I don't want to use the word surprised, but did you expect Virginia Tech to pick up slot wide receivers in the portal?
Not really. There's so many slot types already, and that was the problem this past year. Was the wide receiver room was unbalanced. There were more slot types. Like they were playing Lofton on the outside, and he's a slot type. Sometimes they played Blue on the outside. He's a slot type. I even consider Stephen Gosnell more of a slot type than an outside receiver. And obviously these days, guys like Daquan Wright, they're not traditional slots, but when you go with that 2 tight end set, most of the time that second tight end is lined up in the slot. Yeah. So I didn't expect it. I think it's one of those where it wasn't necessarily a target from day one. It just kind of depends on who's available. Like, we're not targeting this position unless somebody that we can't say no to becomes available. Right. So I think that was the case with Hyatt for the most part. I think he's an excellent get. How you balance?
Did you just say Hyatt?
Hyatt, Jaylin Hyatt.
Jaylin Hyatt.
I was like,
no, I knew exactly
Jaylin Lane.
Yeah.
Jaylin Lane's an excellent get, I think. How do you balance out the slot playing time now? Obviously, I was thinking, okay, Dwayne Lofton's going to move inside to the slot this year to his more natural position because he wasn't able to do that this past year. Yeah. I still think that will probably happen. But you've also got Daquan Wright. The majority of his snaps this past season came in the slot. So that's the tricky thing about the transfer portal. You don't want to block anybody. You don't want to block your young talent, right? You can get a really good player in the transfer portal, and sometimes that leads to a really good player leaving at some point. Case in point, you had Brock Hoffman, who was a very good center for Tech, who's in the NFL right now. But then you lose Brian Hudson, who's an outstanding starting lineman for Louisville and would still be starting at Virginia Tech. Yeah. So you basically traded a 4-year starter for a 2-year starter when it came down to that. So you got to get that balance right. Like, what's the dynamic there? Like, a lot of times when you use that second tight end, like Daquan Wright, it comes at the expense of the slot receiver. Yeah. The slot receiver's off the field. So it'll be interesting to see how those dynamics work out when the season starts.
Well, and you talked about possibly the opportunity to move Daquan Wright to the outside.
I mean, that's kind of where he played in high school. But again, they just brought in Daquan Felton and Ollie Jennings III. Like, which one of those guys goes off the field? Now they're giving themselves options, which I like very much. And I think they've got more overall talent at wide receiver now. And the guys behind them, Christian Moss is going to be more experienced. Jalen Jones is going to be more experienced. So they should be in a better situation.
And ultimately, I think coaches will tell you, you take as many good players as you can get. Right. Mm-hmm. And worry about that stuff later. And then there's always injuries that enter into it.
The good thing is 2 years left.
Yeah.
2 years left. And of course, these guys, he's going to be in here in the spring. And this goes for all the transfer guys. They're going to be here in the spring. And now there's going to be a competition for playing time. And Virginia Tech still has to get down to the 85.
So how many wide receivers do we have in this?
I don't know, 15 or 16, something like that. Listen, and you need to drop 7 or so total overall scholarship players by the time the season, but by the summer, basically. Yeah. So there's going to be a big competition for playing time in the spring, and you will lose players. That's inevitable.
How important do you think it is, and I was going to kind of wait till we talked about all three, but you brought it up. How important do you think it is to bring in guys? I mean, you have to bring in a couple of grad transfers. That happens. A guy looking for, one more opportunity, maybe a step up. But to bring in guys that have multiple years of eligibility left, the opportunity to develop him, and these guys all fall into that category.
That is what I like, is all these transfers, with the exception of Ollie Jennings, have multiple years of eligibility remaining. So they're not one and dones. So it's like, it's very possible that you could lose a young player at the end of the spring, a young player that has potential, because let's face it, you bring in 2 outside receivers, and then you've got Christian Moss as well. You've got Lofton, who could play on the outside. What does that do for Tucker Holloway, right?
Right.
He's the punt returner as of right now at this moment in time, but like, I don't want to have the thought of him blowing his red shirt year to be a third string receiver that doesn't get on the field, right? So that's part of figuring out the whole transfer portal.
I think that's a legit question, Gio, but I've said this before. My attitude these days is I look at what is on the team in August.
Right.
And I'm paying attention to that. And I'm, if you're a fan, rooting for that. And I'm getting to where I don't even project anymore because, again, doing the NFL comparison, at least in the NFL, they have contracts.
Right.
Like I'm a Miami Dolphins fan. They got Jalen Waddle. They got Tyreek Hill. Those guys have contracts.
Right.
And that they're going to be with your team at least for a certain amount of time. We don't know that with any college football and basketball players anymore.
No doubt.
And I don't want that to sound like I'm fussing and complaining. I think if you just do take the mindset of this is what we have this year, let's root for this, that's the best way to keep yourself sane as opposed to I used to love looking at the roster and mapping this stuff out and thinking about the future, and it doesn't really work anymore.
Well, the thing that hurts too is when you see some of your best guys upgrading after a season like that. Like you talk about Caleb Smith going to Notre Dame. You see guys going to bigger schools. That's tough to see as well.
Well, and that's what Virginia Tech's doing to North Carolina A&T and Middle Tennessee State. And where's the corner from?
Oh, Georgia Southern.
Georgia State.
Georgia State.
No,
it's Georgia Southern.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of
So,
those.
that's what Virginia Tech's doing to those schools is, hey, you're sophomore All-American there, we'll take him.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the guy from Georgia Southern, let's get into him. Derrick Canteen, cornerback, 5'11", 190 pounds. He was a 2-year starter at Georgia Southern. 3 years of eligibility left on him, something that kind of stood out. Little bit of injury bug with him that caused him to have a red shirt. And so his eligibility is kind of an interesting situation.
Well, he redshirted in 2019, then was a freshman All-American in 2020, where he tied for the nation's lead in interceptions. But that year didn't count towards eligibility.
Right.
So basically, he's a redshirt freshman in 2021. Then he got hurt that year. And this year, and these days, I think they passed a new rule before this past season. If you miss a year due to injury, that year doesn't count, right? So that year doesn't count for him either. So basically, he has 3 years of eligibility remaining. He's basically a red shirt. He was basically like I'm trying to think, 2019, 20. He was basically like a 4th-year redshirt freshman this past season for Georgia Southern, which is insane to think about. So 3 years of eligibility left. A guy who was a freshman All-American who led the country in interceptions. He's going to come in and fight for playing time immediately. He'll have to get used to a higher level of competition, of course. I think you give yourself the opportunity maybe with him on the team. Obviously, Dorian Strong's a very good player. Mansour Delane's a very good player. You can throw Canteen out there at corner and on passing downs, and then that moves Delane into the slot in that nickel role if you wanted it to be that way. Because I think Delane is the best tackler. Well, I know Delane's the best tackling cornerback out of all of those guys.
So far, yeah.
Yeah, so it would make sense to have him in the alley like that in more of a safety role, which is what the nickel role really is. So it gives the defense more depth. It gives the defense more options. They could move Mansour Delane to safety now if they wanted to. I don't think they should, but they could if they wanted to. I think that's a real quality pickup.
Go ahead, Will.
Well, Canteen, his size is good too. I'm assuming this is an accurate listing from Georgia Southern, 5'11", 190. That's decent size for an ACC level cornerback, and I think he was first team All Sun Belt in 2020. Same year that he was freshman All-American.
Am I wrong in saying now with this acquisition and what you already have, this is feeling like a little bit of a loaded cornerback room right now for Virginia Tech?
I think you have 3 starting caliber.
Yeah, they have
players
more than
there.
2 guys,
right? And they've recruited well. There's a guy or two from this freshman class this past year that I think could contribute early. Dante Lovett, obviously, and they've got guys that redshirted this past year that they're high on. Cam Johnson and Devin Alvis. No, I don't know the extent of their knee injuries that they suffered.
Correct.
Virginia Tech hasn't seen fit to tell us. All I know is that they were about to play, about to possibly burn their red shirts, and then they both got hurt in the same practice. The same David Cunningham. Like it was in the session where the media was actually there. So David Cunningham was there when it happened. So I don't know the extent of their injuries and when to expect them back or anything like that. But I definitely want to say from top to bottom at Virginia Tech, cornerback is the position where there is more ACC talent from top to bottom, from first string to fourth string.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Probably than any other position.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. Well, last but not least on our list, certainly not least, running back acquisition by Bayshul Tuten, 5'11", 195 pounds from North Carolina A&T. His stat list from a season ago is really jaw-dropping in a couple of different ways here. 208 carries for 1,363 yards and 13 touchdowns, 31 receptions for 342 yards and 4 more touchdowns, averaged 6.6 yards per carry a season ago. 2 years of eligibility left, and his offers list was pretty impressive as well once he hit the portal. Georgia, who is the two-time defending national champs now, BC, Missouri, Kansas State, who just won the Big 12, Pitt, and Florida. So kind of a sought-after guy.
Now, before everybody gets too excited,
I'm not sure that Georgia.
I'm very sure. I doubt his Georgia offer was committable. Otherwise, he was originally committed to BC. Tech flipped him. Yeah. Like, he wouldn't have committed to Boston College over Georgia. He wouldn't have committed to Virginia Tech over Georgia. If Georgia's offer, I think it's one of those. You might have an offer if these scenarios shake out. And these days, guys all report that as offers.
And certainly the depth chart's more stacked at Georgia. So
right.
If it was a legit offer, maybe he looked at the depth chart and just thought, appreciate it.
Right. But at any rate, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because Georgia was interested enough to evaluate him and recruit him.
Yeah.
All right, so he has talent, and I think when I look at him, he reminds me of some sort of a combination of like Khalil Herbert and Mike Emo as far as his low center of gravity, like the size of his legs. Like his feet don't get high off the ground when he runs, and that's generally a good sign for a guy who's going to run with power. Yeah. And he seems to have good vision. 31 catches, he can catch it out of the backfield, so it's not like he's a one-dimensional
I think it's odd
player.
that he only had averaged like 10 yards a catch. That tells me he was getting stuff out of the backfield because he's got breakaway speed.
Well, yes, but 6.6 yards per carry is pretty good too. We'll take
and he had 13 for over 100 against Duke. I forget the exact number.
Yeah,
and as a freshman 2 years ago, I think he had 7 for 54 against Duke. So
that's
his 2 games against Power 5 competition, he's done well, averaged a good number of yards per carry. He's going to come in and immediately compete for the starting job, in my opinion.
Yeah, so I see the comments. Trust me, I've seen the comments. We don't need another small running back.
He's not a small running back. Look at his picture.
Watch his film. Watch his film.
I put a picture. Yeah, right. Watch the video I've put in there. Look at the picture I put in there of him. That is not a small back. All right, don't look at a guy's weight. Look at his build. Like Malachi Thomas weighs more. Technically,
but he has a more slender build.
Yes, this is a low center of gravity, thick build. Yeah. Like this is a durable build.
He certainly looks durable. And how many carries did you say he had? 200 and something?
208.
That's a durable running back. And so Chris embedded a short video in the article that we did about him, where you can see all this. You can see the size through the legs, and you can see the vision and explosiveness when he runs. And so somebody on the message board is like, "Oh, he reminds me of Ryan Williams," and I'm like, I don't compare anybody at Virginia Tech to Ryan Williams. Ryan Williams was very slithery, and I agree with Chris that Tuten's more like Khalil Herbert in the way that he runs. His patience, his vision, and he takes what looks like a decent run and turns it into a much better run. And so anyway, after looking at our article and watching the video that Chris put in it, it suggested a video from when Tuten was in high school. He had the thighs in high school. That's how this guy is built, so just because his height figure begins with a 5, there's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of great 5'11", 195, 200-pound running backs.
Yeah, and he's listed at 5'10". I think Herbert was listed at 5'9", but I actually think Tuten looked shorter than 5'10", which I consider to be a good thing.
So in the article you said 5'11".
Did I? Yep. Well, that's probably what A&T.
So he's around 5'10", 5'11".
Well, he looks shorter than that.
Okay.
Chiron Stith build. There's another comparison. Chiron was about listed, I think, at 5'8", 200 pounds.
Yeah.
This is a short, squatty running back with a low center of gravity, good lower body strength. Would not shock me if he became the starter immediately at Tech. And just from a durability standpoint, like Keshawn King's always hurt. I think Malachi Thomas is a talented running back, but
misses a lot of time due to injury.
He's been hurt, and he needs to add mass.
It's hard to add mass when you're hurt, too.
Right. Bryce Duke is big enough. It's going to be a big spring for him. I wonder what, if this – I'm trying to figure out which running back who I think this has the biggest effect on, and I think Keshawn King. He's just not durable.
I think that's fair.
I think this – and King is capable of catching passes out of the backfield. Tuten caught 31 passes out of the backfield.
Yeah.
So I think if you're looking for traditional running backs – we're just going to, just as far as handing the ball off, first down, second down, whatever. I think Malachi Thomas, Tuten, and Duke would be your top 3 options.
Well, I think Tuten looks really good. What's the downside? What do you think could keep him from earning that starting spot?
I mean, it's the scouting report could be wrong. It's hard to get an accurate scouting report sometimes on a guy who's playing FCS competition, right? So we could all be wrong about it. He might get to a higher level and just not be able to do it, but I doubt that's the case. Honestly, you can get a more accurate scouting report of players against FCS competition than you can high school players, right?
Right.
High school players aren't as good as FCS players.
Right. That's right.
So I feel good about it. I feel good about it. I think it's a higher percentage of chance of success than a high school running back recruit. So and again, 2 years of eligibility remaining. So you got a chance to have him for your next 2 years. So I think there's no issue at all with that take. I remember when Virginia Tech first offered him, like, oh man, that's a pretty good offer. And then I guess he committed to BC pretty quickly because I just put him out of my mind. And when he committed last week, I'm like, that name sounds familiar. Oh yeah.
He tweeted, when he tweeted his graphic for committing to Tech, he was like, change of plans.
And I wondered what that meant. Because I looked through his Twitter, and I guess he had deleted his original BC commitment.
Yeah, I went looking for it.
Yeah, and I'm like, what is he talking about? Change of plans? I didn't find out that he had committed to BC till like after I wrote my article.
Gotcha.
But
Today's MLK Day, and classes start tomorrow. So there's pretty much the guys you're seeing. They're going to play for Tech. I don't think they're going to lose the portal.
The portal closes on Wednesday.
Yeah.
There's
Right. Well, and this might be a tough question to answer, but I think it's worth asking. From a culture standpoint, why are these 3 guys and maybe even the rest of the class as a whole good fits for Virginia Tech?
Well, that's up to this gigantic coaching staff that Virginia Tech has these days to figure out. It's the biggest staff in Virginia Tech history, the highest paid staff in Virginia Tech history. So I think it's up to them to do the research on each one of these guys and the personalities and work ethic and things like that. But I look at the guys who were coming in. Tuten doesn't look like he's missed any lower body leg days.
He has not missed any meals.
Right? Yeah. So Ollie Jennings is an in-state guy with a close relationship with Fontel Mines. You've got guys sometimes that have been playing at a lower level and put up great numbers. Maybe they don't feel like they're getting the recognition they deserve, and they're excited about testing themselves against a higher level of competition.
Yeah.
You want people who are driven like that. I think some people look at guys when they enter the portal, successful players who enter the portal, and they're like, oh, he's selfish. He's just looking for the best NIL, blah, blah, blah. Well, maybe sometimes that's the case for sure, but like for these FCS guys and these group of 5 guys, most of the time it's just about they're driven people and they want to test themselves against a higher level of competition.
So let's talk about the NIL piece of the puzzle for a second. As you know, I've been doing a lot of talking to NIL people, Commonwealth, Triumph, the Hokie way, and they're telling me that NIL is just a piece of the puzzle. It's not just a payday, that they still are taking into consideration proximity to home, their relationship with the coaching staff, their ability for playing time, facilities actually still enters into the picture, And so the NIL piece is just one part of it. It's not like I don't know that Caleb Smith is going to Notre Dame for an NIL payday. That's the last thing I think of when I think of Caleb Smith transferring to another school.
Absolutely.
With him in particular, for sure.
I think with Caleb Smith, you look at you got a short window where you have to make a decision, and at the point where he needed to enter the portal, Virginia Tech had not added Kieran Drones. They hadn't added anybody in the portal at that point. So all the knowledge Caleb Smith had at that point was the offense next year was going to be the exact same offense as it was this past year.
When I caught 30-some passes.
Right.
Well, he's about to have Sam Hartman throw him the ball.
Right, exactly. So,
and did you know do you remember if Hartman was committed to Notre Dame when Caleb committed to Notre Dame?
Hartman committed after Caleb.
Okay.
oh yeah, Hartman just committed last week. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, but
that doesn't mean he wasn't being actively recruited during that time, and they talked about it.
Well, I mean, Notre Dame went 9-4 with a backup
there's
quarterback.
that too.
Right.
That's a better situation anyway. If you're Caleb Smith, you don't want to sit around until January 10th to figure out what Virginia Tech is going to do, and then you lose spot,
And then cross your fingers and hope.
and hope the Notre Dame spot or whatever or whoever is still there.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, he made the best decision for him with the information that he had at the time.
Yep.
I don't know about you guys, but this conversation's making me bummed. We have to wait so long for football season. So let's talk a little bit of Hokies hoops here. What is going on with the men's basketball team right now? And here's my question. I think 2 or 3 games ago, we would have said halt any kind of panic. Is it time to panic now?
I don't feel any differently. Like when Hunter Couture got hurt, I didn't write this, but I felt horrible about it because I didn't think Tech was going to win very much without him. I think there's 3 guys on this team that are indispensable because there's no like-for-like replacement. Mutz, Couture, and Padula.
Yeah.
I'm not at all surprised that Virginia Tech has lost every single game without Couture.
I'm disappointed that until the Syracuse game, they were all close.
Right.
Yes.
And they couldn't find a way to close out.
Correct, but I'm not at all surprised that it happened. Yeah. He's extremely important to what Virginia Tech does, and those backups aren't anywhere near his level, and it pushed other guys into different roles because this didn't happen against Syracuse for the first 2 games without Couture, you had Justin Mutz playing the 3, and he's better at guarding 4s than he is 3s, and you had Grant Basile bumped down to the 4, and he's better at guarding 5s than he is 4s. So it just put everybody in a different role, and Tech's backup guards are extremely inefficient. I did an article last week. An Inside the Numbers type of article. You know, Darius Maddox last year was the 32nd most efficient player in the ACC. Out of about 100 players.
A little over 100.
Right. Yeah. This year he's like 89th. And MJ Collins is next to last in the ACC in efficiency.
In offensive efficiency, right?
Per PER, which is
PER,
which is more weighted towards offense. The issue with PER is it doesn't take it into account defense enough. So Hunter Couture is middle of the pack from efficiency, but he's actually better than that. Yeah. But from a pure offensive standpoint, like Maddox has taken 2 steps back, and MJ Collins is a guy who I thought before the season started, if anybody might redshirt, it might be MJ Collins. Right. He's just not ready to be out there for 20 minutes a game.
He has to.
Yeah,
they don't have
and now that. You know, Padula had an issue already of forcing shots early in the shot clock. Well, now without Hunter Couture out there, that issue I bet he's doing it twice as much.
Yeah, the Syracuse game was rough for Padula. A lot of early shots, a lot of early deep 3-pointers in the shot clock, and the problem is like none of them went in.
3 of 15 from the field, right?
And like 1 of 9 from 3-point range or something like that.
Yeah, he's shooting less than 30% from the field without Couture.
Yeah,
he was doing his best Joe Girard impression.
Right.
So you ask about, are you surprised that they've gone on this losing streak? There are some things that have happened that I didn't expect. I didn't, in my opinion, and I think the stats bear this out, Padula's efficiency has gotten worse, which I didn't expect. Basile, up until he had a really good game against Syracuse, just was kind of invisible there for a couple of games. Got in foul trouble, wasn't really a factor. So it wasn't just when Couture first got hurt, we all look and we go, okay, like who can fill that role? You're not anticipating that a couple guys will take a step backwards and actually get worse. So that's the neutral way to put it is that's been interesting to see, and I didn't expect that. You know.
Yeah.
All that being said, like everything else being the same, even with Basile taking a step back for a couple of games and with Padula forcing too much.
Basile did hit some big threes.
Yeah,
we'll give him that for sure.
Those, Tech might have lost the Syracuse game anyway because it's a road game. It's a road game in the ACC. They were down by 20 at one point. Okay, it was not a competitive game. But those other 3 games that were right there for the taking, even going as they did, just throw Hunter Couture in there and you win all of them.
Yeah.
So it's a much different basketball team with Couture. Hopefully he'll be back on Wednesday against UVA. That doesn't automatically mean they're going to start winning because it's a road game against UVA.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he missed some very winnable games.
Well, something that has nothing to do with Couture in a lot of ways that has been a struggle for the Hokies is they're shooting from beyond the arc. They really weren't great the whole stretch without him, and then it really came to the surface. 3 of 19 from 3 on the road in the Dome against Syracuse, and it was 2 of 18 before Basile hit that last one, which was sub 10%.
At the buzzer, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought Syracuse played it smart. They did not help off of Tech's 3-point shooters. They gave Virginia Tech the lane in that game. A whole lot of Tech's 3-point looks weren't great looks to begin with, especially Padula's. Darius Maddox is struggling to even find open 3-pointers. He got a few at the end of the NC State game and knocked them down. But he's gone from a 50% 3-point shooter to a 30% 3-point shooter. I would have not have guessed that. I wouldn't have guessed that he was going to shoot 50% for the rest of his year.
No, that's hard to do.
The rest of his career. That's really hard to do. But I didn't think he'd be a 30% 3-point shooter either. So it's not just losing Padula. It's Maddox's shooting dropping off. It's Rodney Rice finally playing in his first game. Like he was supposed to be the MJ Collins role, except better than MJ Collins. So more physically, a better player than MJ Collins, but with that Tech hasn't had him.
So let's drill down into the Rodney Rice appearance a little bit. I thought he did not look overwhelmed. Played 29 minutes, which I totally didn't expect.
That's a lot of time.
Was the primary bringing the ball at the court a number of times. I think it's very difficult to ask a guy who's never played college ball to play his first game in the Carrier Dome. It's such a huge cavernous place, and you'd have to run the stats on it. But asking a freshman who's never played before to try to shoot halfway, he played decent. He didn't shoot decent. What did he go? 1 of 9?
1 of 9.
Yeah. Now he showed a willingness to take the shot, which is good. But it's just going to take some time, and hopefully trying to shoot in that place didn't mess with his head from a shooting standpoint.
Jalen Cone didn't struggle there.
That's true. Yeah. But his first college game, all the shots he's put up have been in the Hahn-Hurst facility and in Castle.
Yeah,
much different field of vision, much different depth perception than in the cavernous Carrier Dome / whatever it's
JMA
called.
Wireless Dome.
Carrier Dome.
Yeah,
It'll always be.
So I was not going to that game expecting anything whatever I got from Rodney Rice, I'd consider a positive, and I got a little more than I thought he would. I thought he had some excellent passes in that game.
Had a steal.
Had a steal.
Do you guys know off the top of your head how many turnovers he had, or Nick? Do you know?
I can pull that up.
Because it wasn't a lot.
He on one of Tech's very few 3-pointers that they hit was to Petula in the corner. It was him who put the ball fake.
That's right.
He should have had another assist, but Maddox didn't finish on the fast break opportunity. I thought he's 2 turnovers. So I thought he handled himself well.
2 turnovers in 29 minutes is pretty good.
Yeah, for your first game on the road.
Yeah.
I think so. I'm encouraged by it. I think maybe 29 minutes was more than I was expecting, but now that I think about it, you want to get him into playing shape. Playing him 8 minutes against Syracuse and then taking a whole week off before you play him another game, that doesn't really do anything for him.
Well, and the other thing is, I think Mike Young mentioned this, that with Syracuse's zone, your offense is a lot more deliberate, and a guy who's not in game shape can play more.
Yes, exactly what I was about to say. They don't that game was not at this big frantic pace.
They did a lot of pass the ball around the top 3 of the arc,
right,
and then go with about 10 seconds left.
Right.
And they left themselves with not a ton of time to do something. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, you're right. There was a lot of that standing around, and the top 3 at the arc just pass it around, and it was
so
pretty much the whole second half.
So I was encouraged by Rice. Glad he's back. Hopefully get Couture back ASAP. The season's nowhere close to being over, as we know from last year. The crazy as this sounds, Tech is in better shape right now than they were a year ago at this time.
Because of their non-conference.
Well, they've got 2 quad 1 wins. They didn't have any at this point last year.
That's true, and you know, last year they started out 2-7 in the ACC, and they're almost there. They're 1-5.
Right. So it's just not like you don't want to dig yourself into a hole. Last year's situation could have been helped. They could have played better. And I'm not saying they can't play better now. They need to do a better job defensively against Syracuse, denying the ball. But at the same time, I think Tech is probably 2 to 3 games better right now, probably 3 games better with Couture. And we're all sitting here talking about Mike Young's ACC Coach of the Year, maybe, right? I mean, it just comes down to that.
So forget the Syracuse game. We'll talk about the other 4 real briefly. Why is it that the Hokies are struggling to close out the games towards the end? Because there were a couple of comebacks. Every single one was close at the end. What is going wrong in the last couple of minutes that the other team just has more points at the end?
I think NC State, Tech spent the game down by anywhere from 8 to 12 points most of the game. Then they rallied at the end. I mean,
to make it look closer than it was.
To make it look closer than it was.
So last year during the 2-7 start, I remember we did a little short bit on a podcast about how they were just failing to make things happen in the last 3 or 4 minutes of the game. I don't really get that vibe here. There are a few more shots I'd like them to make, but I'm perceiving it as more of, to your point about the NC State game, more of a game-long kind of thing.
Yeah.
When they do get up, they're not showing the ability to separate, that kind of thing. I don't really see it as an end-of-game thing, although you always want your guys to make everything at the end of the game.
They closed against Oklahoma State. They closed out against Penn State. Yeah, I mean, they're close games before they closed out, and Hunter Couture was on the court. I mean, we talk about not having Couture, like he's not out there for 40 minutes, right? So he's not out there for the first 39, so it means he's also not out there for that last minute when it comes down to close games out. Like he really helps in those situations. But I'm not saying it's all Hunter Couture and everything like that, because I don't want to put it all on like one player's shoulders or anything like that. But all things, if everything else had happened exactly the way it has happened, and you throw the best defender and the best 3-point shooter on the team back onto the team, and 3 of those losses were 1-possession games, basically, then that's the difference.
Well, it's never easy in the ACC. We know that, one of the best conferences in college basketball, but this was supposed to be your easier stretch of your ACC schedule. Now you got UVA on the road, Clemson again, this time on the road, Duke coming to Castle, Syracuse coming to Castle, which Cuse is hot. I know they weren't supposed to be, but they are. They've won 9 of their last 10. Miami, who's ranked, UVA again after that, and that time in Castle. So this is literally a gauntlet coming up here.
I actually think the toughest game there is Miami.
Probably.
There's something about them.
It was the best at home, though, right?
Is the Miami game at home?
Miami game is in Castle. Yes.
Yeah.
I hope after Wednesday night's game at UVA, I don't regret saying that.
Miami's tough, but I also watched them lose to Georgia Tech, who stinks. Right. So I mean,
Duke just got blown out.
Duke is not playing good. They're
technically ranked, but
you're right. They lost again this past week. No, they lost to Clemson, who I think is good. But like Duke is not just losing, but a lot of their losses, they're getting smoked. Like Wake smoked them in. Right.
You hate to see it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So like, if Couture's back, I think Tech's going to beat Duke. Like all those games you just mentioned, the one I'm least worried about is Duke at home.
Interesting.
Strange to say.
I'm not really going to argue with you on that.
No, I don't disagree at all. Not at all. So how does Tech stack up against some of these teams here?
I mean, I think they're right in that group. When everybody's healthy, they're right in that group of the 4 or 5 teams that can compete for the top of the league.
Yeah.
Now they're not going to do that in the standings at the end of the year because they're already too far behind.
Yep.
But they can certainly still win enough games to make the NCAA tournament. They have to play with a sense of desperation when Couture comes back. Like they can't afford any slip ups, right? And in hindsight, losing that Boston College game, Like that's the game that ticks me off because they had Couture. That's the game he got hurt in. Well, but they still had him for the first
they weren't
35
doing well
minutes
with
of
him
the
on
game.
the floor.
But
Right.
they lose that game in the last like 4 minutes without Couture. Do you
That's
think if
true.
he doesn't get hurt, I think they probably win that game.
Who knows? I mean, once overtime, it's possible.
It's Boston College, dude. Who
Yeah.
knows? It's Boston College at
Conti
Boston
Forum.
College.
Yeah.
But anyway,
On the ice.
look, it's just like I'm sure like a greater basketball mind can take a deep dive into the X's and O's and find other things. But I'm a very unemotional, numbers-centric person. And I just look at the numbers when he's on the court and the numbers when he's not on the court. And what is Tech's record? 11-6?
Something like that. 1-5 in the ACC, 11-6.
I think they're 13 or 14 wins right now, probably 14 with Couture.
Yeah.
And we're not even having this conversation.
And that's how that stuff happens. Nobody got hurt last year, and that's how they wound up having a good year.
That's right.
This is completely up to speculation, and maybe we shouldn't even ask it, but I think it's worth asking. When do you honestly, brutally honestly, see Couture playing again?
I hope it's this week. Before the NC State game, I saw him. He was dribbling, but he can probably shoot.
He's practicing. They're posting pictures of him practicing, and he's wearing a shooting sleeve.
Have they posted that?
They have on Instagram, Twitter. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, didn't Mike Young say the difficulty is catching the ball?
the ball.
The shock of the ball coming in,
Yeah.
and hitting that hand is
Well,
bothering the
And
elbow.
the pain. If it's an elbow injury, then the pain shoots up the arm.
Yeah.
And I think he always wears a long sleeve shirt when he's on the bench in games. And I think if you look at it, I can detect like
A little something,
little
something.
brace under there or something like that. I hope it's this week. Remember originally, I think Greg Roberts said on his radio show that it
4 to
was
6
4
weeks.
to 6 weeks.
Yep.
And I think this Wednesday would be 4 weeks.
I think that's what people on the boards are saying.
And for people who question Greg Roberts, now remember, Greg Roberts used to run BeamerBall.com, where he worked with John Boleyn every day. So the two would be very tight. And now John Boleyn's wife is the chief of staff of the basketball program. So you don't have to put 2 and 2 together.
You don't have to connect a lot of dots.
Yeah.
So he knows what he's talking.
He knows
You know how
what
you
he's
used to-
talking
You have
about.
those books when you were kids, connect the dots, and some of them you could already tell what it was before you even started connecting the dots.
Yes.
That's one of these.
All right.
Right.
Interesting.
So
Interesting.
I hope this week. But at this point, like, I just want him to, whenever he comes back, he's got to be healthy. Like, I don't want him to come back and have a setback.
Right. Last question here on the talk of the men's basketball program. I think that a lot of Tech fans know this, but it's still kind of interesting. When you compare football to basketball, where does the meaning in the rivalry with UVA differ from football to basketball, since we're playing UVA on Wednesday night?
I think
Pick me. Because I saw that you had that planned as a topic for discussion today, and the first thing that came to mind was, well, there have been a lot more meaningful basketball games between these two in the last 10 years than there have football games. And it just comes down to that. Like, you go back to the I don't know how many years ago this was, where UVA, if they beat Tech in JPJ, was going to be ranked number 1. They were number 2 in the country, number 1 had lost. So Nick says it's 2018. That was a great game. A lot of drama in that one. And I talk all the time about how tough it is to watch basketball. You live and die with every possession. And there's no, 30 to 40 second break between plays. And I remember just watching that thing on TV and being wired down the stretch of that one. And I haven't felt that way about a Tech UVA football game, even the close ones that they've played.
right, because all it is you get to say, hey, we won. And there's no larger.
We're 6-6 and they're 5-7.
Oh, yeah, haha. We get to go to the bowl game that nobody's going to watch.
I mean,
What about that one
you
where
get
it
to
was
go
to
to-
decide who goes
right.
to the ACC championship?
When was that?
That was
That was
It was my freshman year.
Bryce
UVA went to
Perkins.
the Orange Bowl.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I had a
So there's like a once every 6 or 7 years where a Tech UVA game actually means something on a larger scale than just the game itself.
right.
I've just been more into the basketball, and maybe that's just a me thing. I've just been more into the basketball games.
Yeah.
Because of what Tony Bennett has done at UVA, that hasn't been done at Virginia's football program in many years.
Right.
That when you beat UVA, that's a big win. And I don't feel that way about their football program.
Yeah, and just ever since he was hired, and ever since Buzz Williams and then Mike Young after Buzz, you just go into each one of those Tech UVA games feeling like both teams are exceptionally well coached. And Vern Price's staff has only been here a year, so it's unfair to completely judge them. It's been a while since you go into a Tech UVA game and you feel like, man, both of these football teams are just exceptionally well-coached football teams, right? Like, I think Justin Fuente was a solid coach who had CEO problems, not X's and O's problem.
Right.
I think Bronco Mendenhall was a solid coach, but not like an elite coach, not like Tony Bennett, right?
Yeah.
And so I get the feeling that, like, whenever I watch a Tech UVA basketball game, that it's just better. It's a better product on both sides, to be honest with you.
So here's what it boils down to. You go back 3 weeks or so, 3 or 4 weeks ago, when both teams are rolling. And Seth Greenberg sat there on ESPN and said the ACC championship runs through the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Now,
No one's going to be saying that about the ACC football championship anytime soon.
No, not at all. Now, I want to point one thing out. So Tech has lost 5 in a row. The world is ending, obviously. Before Tech,
It really does feel like it.
Before Tech lost 5 in a row, I believe they won 24 of their previous 28,
Right.
or 24 of their previous 29, or something like that.
Something crazy like that.
So, like, chill.
Chris Coleman says, chill.
That's a social media soundbite.
Yeah, that one's definitely getting posted. All right, before we take our break, Katie, what you got for us in the fourth chair?
I had a bunch to talk about with football, and we transitioned from that topic a little soon.
That's
so
all right.
Bring it back up. Bring it back up.
We can dive back into it now. 2 weeks from today is the long-awaited ACC schedule release on the ACC network starting at 7 p.m. So as an away game connoisseur myself, it's time to start booking flights to Tallahassee and booking bourbon tours in Louisville.
Nice.
All the fun stuff. Excited for that. Hopefully, well, we will do a podcast after that to kind of
Absolutely.
take it all in. The SEC schedule has been out for 4 months, so I hope that they fix that sometime soon where we're waiting forever. And the SEC's was released in September. But
Wow.
I wonder what that is. Is it stadium conflicts or something like that? That's usually what causes that to happen.
yeah.
Well, the ACC's always done it, like, in January, though, right?
Oh.
But that's no excuse.
Well, you got to think too. The SEC doesn't have a single team that's playing in an NFL stadium. You got Pitt, like they do concerts and stuff there.
Yeah.
Miami plays in an NFL stadium, concerts, everything else. So yeah, it probably could be stadium conflicts.
Did we derail you, Katie? Was that
We
headed
did.
somewhere?
Anyway.
Not really. No. Another thing I was going to mention is Narelle Pollard announced he's coming back, which is going to help with defensive line. And I know that this year is a big year for J.C. Price. Chris, you wrote about it on TechSideline.com. I mean, he announced he's coming back. Additionally, I mean, and as expected, Tywan Garbett is leaving. So it's going to be an interesting position to watch next year. Obviously, cornerstone by Pollard and Kendricks. So excited that he's coming back. But
Yeah, I really like those defensive tackles.
They don't get enough credit.
Yeah, those guys, they had a good season. They
did.
At least the top 3 did. You know, Panay still got some developing ahead of him, but he's a hard worker and he can get there. But overall, I feel good about Tech's group of defensive tackles.
Josh Fuga.
Right, you've got to find.
He was banged up a lot this year.
Yeah, and you got to find somebody to replace Garbett's production. You know, they've obviously targeted some transfer portal defensive ends, lost one of them. But now that I understand that he had a Liz Frank injury and he gained 20 pounds since his injury, I'm not sure he was going to be a defensive end for Tech.
Yeah, he committed, and then
Varner, we're talking about.
Varner committed from Temple. And where did he skip out
Ended
to?
up going to Wisconsin.
Wisconsin. Okay.
Yeah, so he was at 280 when I thought he was 260. So he was at that weight where, like, you're too small for defensive tackle, but you're also too big for defensive end in Tech's scheme. It was, and with a Liz Frank injury, it was going to be easier for him to put on 10 pounds and play defensive tackle than lose 20 and play defensive end. I don't think he was interested in adding more weight to play defensive tackle, so he's going to Wisconsin. So whatever. I don't want to talk about somebody who's not coming.
I was about to interrupt.
I'm just trying to explain the
And
situation.
I'm like, he's not coming here. Why do I want to talk about that?
But like, so now you're back. Tech did pursue another transfer defensive end who is going to Colorado now.
Is that the one out of
The
Arkansas?
one from Arkansas. He's
Yeah.
going to Colorado. Forget his name, but he started his career at Georgia Tech. You like to have another defensive end on there, but on the whole, like when I think of defense at Tech, the first thing that comes to my mind is who's going to play Mike, and is the safety play going to be improved? I think of that before I think about the defensive line. I don't think there's a star on the defensive line, but I do think it'll be solid.
Yeah.
I remember last time I was sitting in the fourth chair during football season, I had to do a segment that was like positive things happening in Virginia Tech athletics that don't include a Hokies win. And that was during football season. And now it's basketball season. And I hope that I don't have to do that segment like pretty much ever again since we can't win a basketball game. I was looking at the schedule and it's hard to believe that the last game we won was against Grambling State before Christmas.
We didn't win at all while I was home.
Yeah, I missed that game because I had to go home. So I'm trying to think the last game we won that I got to watch.
UNC.
I guess so.
Yeah.
Wow, that was a while ago.
So I guess the good things are the women's basketball win against Louisville. Not sure if we're going to talk about that in the second half, but that was a cool graphic that they put out that they hadn't beaten the women in 27 years, and it was the same year that baseball hadn't beaten Louisville in 27 years, and they both beat them in the same season.
And we're going to beat them in the KFC Yum Center for the first time.
Top it all off. Let's hope. Yeah.
That's right.
We better,
I
because
might
they're
go
not
take
very
my bourbon
good.
tour later this year to watch that
Yeah.
game.
So back in the day, I think I was a sophomore. Tech beat Louisville by 20 points in Freedom Hall, and that was at that point in time. That was Louisville's worst ever loss in Freedom Hall.
Really?
Yeah,
I don't know what Freedom Hall is.
that was their old Coliseum.
Right,
before
I
they built the
figured.
Yum
And
Center.
Memphis played in the Pyramid, right? Those were the old
Pyramid.
school. Yeah. Is it really? Wow.
What?
This is called a Bass Pro
Memphis
Shop.
is old arena is now a Bass Pro
That's
Shop.
insane.
Yeah.
Oh, it's now a Bass Pro Shop. It's not an arena sponsored by Bass Pro Shop.
The Bass Pro Pyramid.
Yeah.
It's the Bass Pro. Okay.
Wow. Anything else, Katie?
That's it.
That's it.
Mecca of bass fishing.
All right, let's take a quick break here. When we come back, there is a certain Virginia Tech athlete that nobody is talking about. You won't believe who it is. That's next on the Tech Sideline podcast. We'll be right back. Welcome back, Hokie Nation. Thanks for sticking with us through the break. Remember, the Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company, but the TSL podcast is also sponsored by Triumph NIL, NIL for good. Triumph NIL is a unique and experienced sports marketing agency specializing in building custom name, image, and likeness partnerships for student athletes with members of the business community and fans. Their motto, recruit, retain, reward. Visit triumphnil.com to learn more and follow them on social media. So we're very grateful for our new partnership with Triumph NIL. All right, Nick Brown joins the set. Katie Adams still in the fourth chair. Will is now behind the scenes producing, and Chris is getting busy writing. So, Nick, let's go ahead and talk some Hokies women's basketball. It's safe to say a couple of humbling tests for the Hokies and a couple of road losses at Clemson and Miami. Lost by double digits to Miami, who's a very good team, by the way. Yeah. Made it all the way to the ACC championship game a year ago. Yet this team continues to play with such heart and such fight. Knocked off Virginia and knocked off Louisville since we last had a show. So a couple of ups and downs, but steady moving for the women's basketball team.
Team is still good. I would argue that it's still probably going to end up being like regular season, have the best regular season in any Tech program this season, in the school year, I guess. They're real, unless baseball, of course, is just as good. But yeah, they're good. They're still really, really good. The Clemson game was weird. Clemson's just a gritty team. They made the game ugly. Tech doesn't play an ugly game. They turn the ball over, and they don't. They're physical. The Tech team is physical, but when other teams match that physicality and even up it a little bit, Tech gets a little flustered. And I think that's just what happened. UVA, that was an awesome game. No Kitley that game, and still pulled off a win over what was a 12-1 team at the moment. UVA's kind of slid off a little bit, but that was a good UVA team at the time. And they were full. They've had some off-court issues now, but that was still a good team. Really high-quality game. Like I said, no Kitley. I thought the ball really flowed well without Kitley. And I went with my grandfather, and I was watching there sitting, and I was like, man, there is nobody in the paint right now. And since there's no Kitley, Taylor Soule and everybody was behind the three-point line. What was cool about that is it gave Kayana Traylor and it gave Taylor Soule and George Amore free lanes. You have Kitley down there. She's great in the post, great, but when she's down there, that means another defender or two are down there. So if George is driving, someone's going to be able to slide over and defend her. And so when nobody's in the paint, you can have people slashing into the hole like that. And Kayana Traylor, like I said, Taylor Soule, and Amore had monster games that game. Taylor Soule's been on a tear, by the way. But Soule, 18 points. And then Deasia Gregg has been incredible being thrown in. She was thrown into the starting lineup that game as well. Played an awesome game. She's played really well recently as well. But, yeah, and then Miami game, like you said, it's just a good team. And I think Kitley was still nursing her injury, still had 20. But still nursing a little bit of injury. The Cavender twins are exceptional. But that Louisville game, man, that was by far a huge win. I know Louisville's not up to par as what they should be this year, but
still a good team.
It's still fun. I mean, that's still beating a top 5 program in women's basketball, in the 2000 era. So, I mean, that was still a very exciting win.
Evan Hughes said it best that the ACC is so deep, the winner of this league is likely going to have 4 or 5 losses. Oh, yeah. The Hokies currently have 3. Are they still in contention for being one of the best teams in the conference?
They'll still be top 4 seed. I think they're going to still get a double bye. You've already beaten 2 of what should be the top 5 or 6, UNC and Louisville. You're not going to. I don't think they play UNC again.
They do play UNC.
They do play UNC. Is it Louisville they don't play again? I think they played Louisville once. But yeah, so you're not going to see a lot of these teams again. You get Duke coming up. That's tough. But these next 2 games, they're 2-12 combined, Wake Forest and Pitt. If Tech loses one of those 2 games, that's not very good at all. I'm just going to say it. Those are 2 not good teams. Those are 2 teams that they should whoop up on. And then cruise on to Duke after that, and then a little bit of a tougher stretch. But, I mean, NC State and Duke are really kind of the only true competition up next. And you throw UVA in there again. But I think Tech should still be a top 4 seed. They're a good team, man. I mean, this team's still studly and still missing an All-American, man. Like, that's a good team.
Speaking of that All-American, I'm hopeful that she is going to be back a little sooner than we thought. Hinted on Twitter that she could be back maybe as early as this week on Thursday. I know their next game is up in Pittsburgh. The February schedule is tough for the women. Obviously, NC State twice, UNC again, Duke twice, who is ranked in women's basketball rankings. They usually aren't as good and get overshined by the men's team, of course, but they might give the Hokies some trouble this year. So excited for Ashley with Owusu's return, whenever that's going to be. Hopefully it's Thursday and she can kind of get into the swing of things before that gauntlet of a February schedule.
She put out a tweet yesterday, and it was funny because she tweeted like in December, and she was like, I can't wait to play again, with like a crying emoji or something. And then she tweeted yesterday, she like quote tweeted her old tweet like a month later, and she said, I still really want to play. And it like had another like,
I think she did another one.
And then quote tweeted it yesterday, put like 10 smiley faces.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know what that means, but.
And I want to say it was a pinky or it was a finger.
She broke her pinky or something.
Yeah. And middle school back in the day, I went to Buzz Williams basketball camp. So excited. Little middle school Nick, get to meet Buzz Williams and all the players. I broke my pinky on the first day, and it is still crooked. And let me tell you, that seems very seems
like a minimalistic injury, but in reality it's not.
I couldn't compete in the 8-foot dunk contest. I couldn't dribble for the rest. I mean, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but it sucks and it hurts. Still broken bones. So it is good to have her back if we can. I mean, she is so smooth, man. She is so smooth with the ball, and it gives depth. That is the biggest thing. Tech is only playing 6, maybe 7, throwing Guyman in a lot of minutes recently, who's playing well, but it's not a player you want to see out there for 30 minutes, obviously, or a key reserve. So that's good to give bench minutes and then you can run 8 deep, So I am excited for her to be back, and I think Tech can get back on a roll. I mean, people are freaking out. The team's still 13-3, man.
Right.
That's still a top 15 team. Probably going to move up a little bit again with the win over Louisville. Let's see, man.
Is Elizabeth Kitley, as of right now, the ACC player of the year? She's 4th in the conference in scoring, 1st in rebounding, 3rd in field goal percentage, and 1st in blocks. She's averaging a 19.11 rebound double-double.
I actually want to answer this one. So she's really good. The player that I would be worried about is Olivia Miles from Notre Dame, who has been incredible the entire year. Her, Dara Mabry, I mean, Notre Dame obviously gave Virginia Tech issues. I'm glad we don't have to play them again, that's for sure. If there's a matchup in the ACC tournament, that would be extremely exciting, and hopefully they could get it done then. But Kitley is up there, that's for sure. But if you would ask me right now, and if the season was over right now, I would give it to Olivia Miles.
Well, and I think Tech also played another frontrunner for the ACC Player of the Year against Louisville. Haley Van Lith dropped 29 on the Hokies' head, and she has been the stud this year for Louisville, and she's really good. I mean, there's no way around it. She's just good at basketball, and she is so quick, so fast, and she didn't get fouled, but there was a little bumping around on that last shot that she put up the floater. Man, she's fun to watch. She's a real deal. So Kitley is great, and she is probably a top 5 player in the ACC by far. But it's so hard to win back-to-back Player of the Year, and also the judges too. I mean, unless the second year you're so far and above everybody else, the judges also kind of like to see other people, the media members. Like, you don't want to be just handing out to the same person each year, unless, like I said, she's dominating, and she is dominating, but. Like you said, Olivia Miles is so freaking good, and then Haley Van Lith, and there's just good players all around the ACC. So, as much as I love Kitley, it would be really, really hard to go double-double back-to-back unless she goes on a monster tear, which she could be possible of.
That reminds me of the idea of people saying Caleb Williams winning back-to-back Heisman. It's so hard to do, but a player as good as that coming back, we'll see. Even though there's some chatter that CJ Stroud might be coming back, I think
he just literally less than an hour ago.
Okay, never mind.
Declared
that was going to be a poor decision, I think, if he decided to come back. So good for him.
Yeah. So I mean. And man, and LeBron in his prime, even Michael Jordan in his prime too. They didn't win MVP each year, even though they probably, well, they are the best player in the league each year. So it's, Jordan was the best player in this time, and LeBron was the best player in his prime as well. So they didn't win MVP every year. So it's, like I said, media members like to, see other people get it as well. And I think Olivia Miles, like, I'm glad she brought it up, is deserving.
You heard it here. Elizabeth Kitley is MJ and LeBron all in one.
Yeah, there you go. She just
all right. Well, the player that I want to talk about, and I want to give credit to where credit is due. We teased it a little bit before the break. Deasia Gregg. She isn't flashy. She doesn't jump out of the box score. But with Owusu out, she's playing huge minutes, particularly on defense. She's playing 23 minutes a game right now for the Hokies. And since Owusu's been out, it's actually been more than that. How big has she been in stepping up? And I just think that she's played this role on this team that they need. She's kind of that heart and soul piece.
Big Mo, man, and she's a stud, especially on defense. Like I said, if you look at the box score, if you're just the casual and you look at the box score, you're like, oh, she's a solid player, but you're not like, star. But if you watch it, that girl is a core piece of that defense. She basically held down the fort in the UNC game, got the game-winning tip at the end to get rid of it, and she made a monster block against UNC prior to that set up Georgia's 3 free throws to win the game. She is a great player down low. Her and Kitley, when they're together down there, I mean, it's kind of like a no-fly zone. I mean, it's a really tough to score on both of them down there, and she's mobile too. Kitley, she's great down low. She's really good at reading defenders when they go up for layups and to time blocks perfectly, but she's not as side-to-side quick as Deasia Gregg. Deasia's not as tall, obviously, but she is super fast and pretty athletic too. So she is a very, very key part on the defense. But, I mean, like you said, with Owusu gone, she's played a lot of minutes. You put Owusu in there, I mean, it's like, oh, who do you start, Owusu or Deasia? And you could also just keep Deasia in, slowly get Owusu back into game shape. Obviously, I'm sure Owusu's ready for game shape. She didn't hurt her legs or, her upper body. It was just a pinky, so she can still, run and stuff in practice. But, yeah, it's very exciting, and we knew she was good last year. She was great, but really coming into her own these last 3 or 4 games and really providing Tech with huge minutes when they're not that deep.
Is this still, last question here on women's basketball, is this still a team that has a chance to compete for a national championship?
Ooh, national championship? That's tough. I mean, I love this team. It's a great team. But, man, South Carolina and Stanford.
Right.
I mean, I saw a score, South Carolina, I think, doubled up on Auburn, and it was like 85-42. I mean, they're freaking good.
Speaking of that, did you see the score of the Alabama LSU men's basketball game this weekend? It was the same thing. They were up by like 40 points.
I mean, it's
insane.
But the thing with South Carolina, like Alabama did that one game, crazy. South Carolina's doing that almost every game.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's scary how good that team is, and Stanford is just there with them. They went to overtime with South Carolina. Do I think this Tech team is a second weekend possible Final Four if they really get hot? Yeah, I mean, I think Final Four is it'll be a tough dream or a tough goal, but they could get there. This team's very capable of it. But I mean, I would have to see. I mean, also we haven't seen Tech played Notre Dame. Yes, that's a good team, but didn't have Owusu in that game. They weren't fully healthy, and but I don't even think Notre Dame's at this South Carolina level yet. This team's still really good, and if they get hot, you never know what could happen. But South Carolina, man, it's another level, dude.
All right, time to flip the script one more time. Talk a little bit of Hokies wrestling. So I think Will's gonna come on. Nick's gonna sub out.
Quick change.
Sorry, Gio, I left you on camera during that.
Hide the cup.
No worries.
So let me be clear that this is going to be a very high-level wrestling discussion because our wrestling specialist is not here today. But that's our fault for just not trying to wrestle him up. Anyway, you guys are on TSL today. If things break right, you're going to do more of a detailed preview of Friday night, which is Virginia Tech Wrestling hosting NC State Wrestling.
Correct.
I think has become the premier rivalry in the ACC. So it's always good stuff, and that's Friday night at 7:00. I have to admit, I don't know if it's on ACC Network or not. Yes, it is. I'm pretty sure it is, because it always is, because it's Virginia Tech and NC State. So I don't have a feel for if Virginia Tech is going to have Mekhi Lewis back on Friday, and that's a question I'll admit I haven't been on Twitter and all that to check into that. But certainly hope so, and we'll try to get that information for you before you guys talk about it later on this week. And one guy that I wanted to draw some attention to is Caleb Henson. I have seen Caleb wrestle once, and it was in Moss Arts Center. We'll talk about that in a second. Caleb's got, and I apologize to our listenership for not having the exact ranked victories he has. I think he is currently ranked 11th in the country in his weight class, and he's had some impressive wins, but I saw him wrestle against Cornell, and Cornell's got the #1 wrestler in the country in that weight class. Yanni, last name starts with a D, don't ask me to pronounce it. Really good wrestler. Even an unsophisticated observer like me there were 2 or 3 wrestlers on Cornell's team that I was extremely impressed by. And Yanni, of course, #1 in the country, and Caleb Henson held his own with him. I think he lost something like 6-2 or 6-3. You know, he didn't get whipped by a guy who is who's ranked #1 and is one of the best overall wrestlers in the country. So there's a lot of buzz around Caleb Henson and his future prospects. And so the other thing you wanted to ask about the Moss Arts Center, correct?
Right. Yeah. Just how what's it like having a match inside the Moss Arts Center? How does it contrast with wrestling inside a castle? And it's kind of, this wrestling program has like a cult following to it. So
yeah, it's Moss holds about 1,200 people, so there's always fewer people there than there are in Castle. They turn out anywhere from 2,500 to 4,000 or 5,000 in Castle. It's interesting if you think about going to see a play or some sort of musical performance, the polite applause that you get during that and the applause during during a sporting event is not what I would call polite. You know, it's more enthusiastic. It's such an intimate environment. It's pretty cool, and they do it up a little bit. They I'm thinking they put a pretty good show on in Castle. And with Moss, it's interesting. They have a handful of cheerleaders over in one of the boxes, like right off stage. So that's kind of cool. And they have a male cheerleader carry a female cheerleader around on his shoulders, and they hold up the weight class that's coming up next. And honestly, I can't recall if they do that in Castle or not. I don't think they do. It's almost like a boxing thing,
right?
Where they're holding up the next round. So it's I'd encourage people to go see it in Moss. They do it once a year. Tickets are pretty affordable. I don't remember what I paid. I really don't recall. $15 a piece or something like that.
Right.
A lot cheaper than most of the performances you get in Moss. So that's my pitch for it. Check it out sometime.
Awesome. What can you say about how much Tony Roby and his program have done for Virginia Tech athletics as a whole? Because he is pretty involved. I mean, he was announcing recruit commits for the football team. Like, he's involved with athletics as a whole. How much has he meant?
Yeah, it's when a program, I'm trying to think, Kevin Dresser, going back to Tom Brands had one good recruiting class and then skipped town. So it's hard to say what he could have done here. Kevin Dresser really built that program from nothing. And when Tony was named, Tony was one of Kevin's assistants. And when Tony was named head coach, there's always that comment of the down the hall hire, and it hasn't turned out to be that at all. Tony Roby has built a consistent top 10 program, very consistent, like year after year, number 8, 9 in the country, that sort of thing. He recruits extremely well. I don't think your average person understands the barriers to recruiting to the Olympic sports at Virginia Tech. And Tony and I have talked about this off the record. There are schools in the ACC that provide so all but one wrestler is on a partial scholarship.
Right.
There is a wrestler who has a full scholarship.
Makai?
You get 3 guesses as to who that is.
Right.
Everybody else is on a partial scholarship, which means they have to pay
Right.
some amount. I'd have to look at the roster. There are some good wrestlers that come out of this state, but not enough to fill 10 weight classes. So they're recruiting a lot of guys out of state. So these guys are facing, $40,000, $45,000 a year tuition and fees. And only part of that is being settled with an athletic scholarship. There are schools that Virginia Tech competes against in recruiting that provide a lot of other help. Institutional help is the phrase that Tony uses to refer to it. Virginia Tech does not provide much institutional help. So when you see Tony get a commitment and sign a kid top 5 in the country in his weight class, that's an impressive recruiting job. So I just, back to my point, I don't think your average person understands how impressive that recruiting operation is over there. So I think that's the biggest thing he's done. I also think it's the biggest thing that makes them struggle with depth across their program. They've always got some really good wrestlers at some weight classes, but it is a barrier to building like a Penn State-like program where it feels like 8 to 9 of the weight classes are top 5 in the country. It feels that way. I can't spout the statistics to you. So to bring it back around, he brings a program that is always good, always. Are they able to compete for a national championship? There's a big difference in wrestling. Being number 8, it's a long climb up to number 1. It's just like talking about how good South Carolina is in women's basketball. You can be ranked 5th or 6th in the country in women's basketball, and you're way far away from South Carolina.
Right.
And wrestling's kind of like that. But Tony brings a program that is always fun to watch, has produced an individual national champion, and might be able to produce some more. They recruit solidly and is always good. So that's my long-winded answer.
Well, before we wrap things up, I know, Katie, you don't have anything else in the 4th chair. All right. What's coming up on TSL this week? Everybody's back in town. All your interns are back. Time to kind of rev things back up again.
That's a good question. I'm not on the editorial side anymore, so I couldn't tell you. But as always, our written content is awesome. And we're glad to have you guys back and get TSL Today rolling again. If you guys don't listen to it or watch it, you should. It's our shorter form podcast that Gio and the other students do. And I have all sorts of exciting meetings, which I cannot divulge publicly, but I'm 2023 is going to be a really good year for Tech Sideline.
Awesome.
It begins with the Triumph partnership and some things that are going to come out of that. We are... my job this year is strategic partnerships. I'm not in editorial anymore. And so I'm just jacked for some of the stuff that's coming down the pipe for us, and it's going to make us better, and it's going to give more opportunities to the SMA students. And so that's where my heart and my head are right now.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think that wraps things up on today's show. Thanks so much for being with us all morning, I should say. We'll see you again next time. When are we doing another podcast? Just to keep
Probably
people in the loop.
Week. Yeah, during basketball season, we do them once a week, and they tend to be on Mondays. I looked at last year, and that's when we did it. We kind of do it whenever we can during Christmas break, but schedule's probably going to be every Monday morning from here on.
Sounds good. Well, stay tuned for TSL Today, and we'll see you on Monday morning with another edition of the Tech Sideline Podcast.